We are still for Ways and Means Committee. I'm gonna take John's language, I think. And it is Friday, May 9th, and we are still working on S-127. And we're gonna continue our work until lunch and then come back at 1:15 to do more of it. If at some point next week, if folks could watch the special education hearing on the YouTube, that would be great, because we are not attending.
So it's still happening.
It is still happening. It is a joint hearing with Senate Education and House Education. And I can even maybe set aside some time next week for us all to watch it together if we want, but we're not going today. So again, the goal is that we completely finish our language today, and all we're doing on Tuesday morning is a vote.
But we still want to meet it here at 9 on Tuesday.
Yes, 9 on Tuesday.
Okay.
If anyone needs to write anything down about that now, I'm going to take a brief momentary pause while people put that on their calendars. Okay, great.
I may have a doctor's appointment.
Okay.
I can't change it.
No, doctor's appointments are not changeable in this life. Representative Odie, did you have something?
I was just gonna say, if we notice problems in the language over the weekend, we can
Yes, I would encourage,
shout that.
we can,
Yeah.
and it would would be at the point of tiny line edits on Tuesday when we get here.
I get,
Yes,
I get,
yep, okay,
but if we thought something wasn't the right.
yes,
Oh,
okay.
So I didn't get what you want us to do if we find a mistake, which is unusual for me, but you want me to email you or?
Yes, yeah, you can email me and John.
Okay.
And Bill and Charlie, or just me and John, just John, any combination, or just me. Thank you. Something involving this row.
Please not just me.
Email me and some other people if you want. Don't email the whole committee though, because then committee discussions are not something we should do via email. Yes,
Could you start by just articulating what you see as the purpose of this bill?
sure. Purpose of this section of the bill, I cannot articulate the purpose of the bill because frankly, I don't even remember what the other sections of the bill are, Representative Holcomb. But the CHIP portion of the bill is to create financing opportunities to help build housing when there is a certain degree of market failure that makes it hard to build housing otherwise, given that we have a housing shortage.
So any housing, it's about addressing market failure for any housing.
I believe that personally, I believe that the market failure is in affordable and moderate, and that there is no market failure in the case of $900 million home. So yeah.
I agree. So I think what you're saying is the purpose of CHIP is to create affordable housing in places where there's market failure related to affordable housing.
That is what I think the purpose of this is. I'm not speaking for the two other committees that sent it to us or the Senate. Yeah,
Any other wording in there in regards to rural?
for me and my random
Right.
explanation I just came up with, Representative Higley, I would say that rural places might be one of the places where that market failure is happening. Yeah. I also think there might be certain places where cultural norms have prevented folks from building some of the infrastructure that they might need for things like this too. There were a couple of communities that turned down ARPA infrastructure dollars because they couldn't get a townwide vote on them, even though they wouldn't have cost the town anything. So I think this will also help build housing in places like that. I want to back up. I actually don't want to be the person who's singularly defending the purpose of this bill. I have no interest in being that human, and I'm not being put in that position. I'm withdrawing myself from the position that I just allowed myself to be put into. If folks would like to have a 15-minute conversation amongst yourselves about the purpose of the bill, you are welcome to do that, and I will moderate that conversation.
You like me?
Representative Odie, yes.
Yeah.
Please say it to everyone. You do not need to say it just to me.
No, the one thing I'm gonna say about what you said, thing I'm gonna say about purpose and legislative intent is when Elkhart is going to be looking at what the intent is, it would be good if we know what the intent is. So I'm imagining that should be in the purpose section. Right?
Well, it certainly would help. And again, you know, they got the rulemaking section in here, which they're gonna come up with it. That's a concern for me too. So.
Okay,
So it's how you want to handle that.
okay, thank you. So we need to spend more attention on the purpose and the rulemaking sections. Great.
One thing we might consider is looking at what the House version of the bill was when they sent it over to the Senate. I'll take a look at that.
I mean, 497, that.
Was that?
479.
479, I get that switched, because there was 379 and order of that. Yeah,
So what is it?
479.
Thank you.
That did not have chip in it though.
Did not.
Okay,
They're not,
okay,
no,
great.
but in
Okay.
terms of the housing part of it.
Thank you. Okay, I see no one. Okay, so what I would like us to continue going through sections and seeing which sections we can close up. And then know what's sort of left for us to figure out.
I'm gonna
Yes,
say,
Representative
I am still struggling because I don't know what it is we're trying to do with this. And I'm just gonna back up and say, one of the things that concerns me is what we've been seeing across our communities is concentration of disadvantage and concentration of wealth. And I think that's really unhealthy. It's unhealthy for democracy. I think it's unhealthy for our communities. And every one of our tax policies, and I include our education bill, the tax policy, because that's all we're really doing, is there, I want to make sure they're all pulling in the same direction, and it's not clear to me that they are. And so I guess I would just want to have us at least be thoughtful about how all of these policies are going to interact. For example, very high property taxes are now becoming gates to communities in ways that I think are harmful. And this could just exacerbate that if we're not careful. Just want to put that on the table.
I'm just thinking about this as a tool that it gives the ability to surgically improve housing stock in areas where the market has failed.
We are defining at this table market failure in different ways. So we're not all trying to solve the same problem. If I knew what problem we were trying to solve, it would be easier to design a bill that targeted market failure. But I think we're solving different failures.
I think that generally speaking, we all agree that we're not developing enough housing. And I think that this bill aims to make it easier and cheaper to develop housing units within the parameters that we're setting. And we can have different opinions about where those housing units should be. We can have different opinions about why that failure is happening. But I think, like, just to your point of what's the problem we're trying to solve, we're trying to get more stuff built because not enough stuff is getting built in the most layman terms that I could put it.
Right, but how we get stuff built and what stuff we build is going to depend entirely on how we write the bill.
Yeah, no, fully agree with that, but just in, what is the big thing that we're trying to accomplish with this? It's to get more housing.
Any housing or affordable housing?
I think we've heard, low and moderate is the goal, but, mixed use housing, affordable housing, I think we need the gamut. And I don't think we should be using tax dollars to subsidize multi-million-dollar, luxury developments, but I think that we're doing work through the definitions of affordable housing that's in here and the purpose that is in here to mitigate that.
So I think adding affordable and modern housing to our purpose then would be important because that's what's written in.
And I think we asked John to make that change this morning, actually.
We did.
Mhm. Yep.
And I would just, I realize this ship has sailed. Having been on the other side, the more complex, the harder to implement, and the less money actually goes to the intended purpose. I'm just gonna express my extreme disappointment that we have sitting in this bill a bond bank that is a very efficient tool for distributing grants. And instead of just using an efficient tool that gives the people who do this work directly without all the hoops and the whatever and the extra board and this, that, and the other, I'm disappointed we picked a very costly and cumbersome and less transparent way to try to achieve a stated goal.
I appreciate that. I think right now the task before us is to make the CHIP mechanism as effective as it can be, given the mechanism that is before us that we are working with. So I would like to go through and figure out where our remaining decision points are.
Start right at the top, not sure.
I would love that, thank you. So, do folks want, yeah,
Start from the top, elevation, is that what you're?
that's where I'm starting. Mhm.
I just asked John about this, in regards to this perpetual duration. And looking up 27 VSA 610 under duration. And I guess the question I've got for John explained it to me a little bit, but under duration, it talks about a covenant may be perpetual, but may be limited. Then it goes on to say it may be amended or terminated by written agreement of the owners, lands, people involved. And I'm just wondering if that wording talks about perpetual as well. I mean, can perpetual be not perpetual?
John, tell us about how perpetual is.
Yep, so John Gray, Council Livingston Council, basically the way to think about this definition is that the housing subsidy covenant called out in Title 27 that Representative Higley is pointing to doesn't specify a particular durational requirement. It accommodates that you could have different durations. So it has a subsection D that speaks to that. And then what is included in the line of the definition of affordable housing in the CHIP program is housing that is subject to a housing subsidy covenant as defined in that cross-reference of perpetual duration. So you specify outright what the durational requirement is in the definition of affordable housing. I think the last point that you were raising is could folks terminate through sub D? And I think that the conditions, and I can pull up that statute, but I think that the conditions that require consent of all parties. So you would have to be someone who is receiving the benefit of affordable housing, consenting to it being removed from affordable housing. It would work the same way that the housing subsidy covenants that I think that Chris Allen is here, and he's familiar with working with work. So people can negotiate to eliminate this, is my understanding, but I don't know if people are ever an interested party in doing so. I don't want to pull in Chris, but he may have more clarity on that front.
Chris, please.
Chris Darling, Chairman of the Trust. It is possible if all the parties that have agreed to the covenant agree to extinguish it. That is not, very, very, very rare.
Thank you.
Is that comfortable for folks? Okay,
Somewhat.
Great.
I mean, again, I think there's plenty of others.
Yes.
You talked about one of your projects, a lot of, affordability projects in perpetuity. And I just wonder, going forward, how many of these, will be that way as well. I think I've heard some say that they'd like to see that come out of there after all funds have been expended and payments made. That's just to let people know that there are some folks out there thinking that way.
and I imagine the committee of conference could also discuss that. I and Representative Higley, you gave me a great tool to help us get through this day, which is let us all, if we feel somewhat or yes, work through that, keep that a little bit to ourselves for a little bit. And it's only our hard nose that we're gonna get stuck on today for this first round. Does that feel okay for folks?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
kind of missed that because of the phone thing. Can you just repeat that?
Yeah, so as we're working through, if folks are comfortable or somewhat comfortable with a section, that's great. And if someone has sort of a hard no on a section, let's discuss that. Or if someone has a tweak that they, like a tangible suggestion of a tweak, let's discuss that, or a clarifying question.
Okay.
But I don't think there's any universe where we're all going to be completely affirmative on every single section. I certainly am not, and yet I am going to accept that as we work through this week. Okay. Yes.
I have another question in definitions, and this occurred to me this morning, but we were trying to move right through. So in theory, you could have an affordable development that is, well, you could have a development that's 60% housing, so that would qualify as a development under this, as a housing development, with 20% of that 60% being affordable.
Mhm.
So basically, you're saying that as little as 12% of an entire development could be affordable housing. If only 60% of the floor area is housing units, because the rest of it's restaurants or
Mhm.
whatever amenities. And then you're saying that only 20, because the way we're defining it, we're saying it's 20% of the units have to be affordable. And I just wanted to raise that because it just was sort of surprising to me to say, oh, only 12% of the total area would have to really be affordable housing for this to be qualified as affordable housing. And I'm not proposing a different percentage, but I just want to raise that because it was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me this morning.
That's why I've been asking about the
Go through
purpose.
so slowly.
So that's a helpful multiplying of percentages. Thank you for that quick math. And let's think on if we're comfortable with that 12%. Because I feel on the edge on that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna save that as an edge.
It's also not in line with our stated purpose.
Anything else in definitions? Yes.
I would agree with, want to keep the bit about site preparation for development, at least in my community, you know, the demolition and remediation of existing
Yep.
derelict properties is one of the key cost drivers to this.
I have concerns with it written as it is because it feels so loose.
How would you like to tighten it, Representative Holcomb?
I would have proposed taking it out,
Okay.
in part because it could be used to. I mean, it's, you know, it could be used to create high-end housing and private property where someone benefits quite a bit. I mean, I sort of feel like there's certain things that are responsibility of government and there's certain things that are responsibility of the entity that owns the property. But
And where were you talking?
Top of page 3, the green
Part
highlight.
that's very uncomfortably green.
You don't find that soothing?
Are you talking about most specifically including land and property acquisition? Or is it the other things that you're concerned about too?
I just don't know what liability we're opening ourselves up to here. I mean, I'm thinking of properties, I'm trying to think of hypothetical properties that could be done, but the way this reads, and maybe we should ask the attorney to tell us what this could involve, like what is the universe of properties that we might be using public funds to develop that might actually be privately held properties where we are creating a private profit or private gain.
I don't understand.
John, am I understanding this right, that if it's site preparation towards an affordable housing, towards a housing development that includes affordable housing?
Yes, the purpose would apply across, sorry, I just had to restart my computer first, so I don't have to type in front of me. Could someone read the land?
Yeah, site preparation for development or redevelopment, including land and property acquisition, demolition, brownfield remediation, or flood remediation and mitigation.
Yes, so the lead in subdivision A on the page prior.
Mhm.
You have to satisfy the public good and purpose sections in what you're doing with the site preparation. That's caught up in that piece.
So a unit with 12% affordable housing counts as a public good for the purpose of this.
That I don't know. a good broad language, I think.
I think that's where I'm trying to go.
I hear that, and you're backing up over to this section.
But they're all dependent is my point. So,
Yeah.
so my point, if we're saying that the standard is 12% of your housing is an affordable or affordable units, then it's on us to develop, or a developer to clean up a site. We don't know potentially what cost that is, so that the developer can build housing where only 12% of the units are affordable. That's what I'm saying.
It's 12% of the whole project, so 20% of units if we're
Yeah.
calling it affordable.
Yes,
Development, so 12%
12% of the project. Yes.
And so I have put on hold the conversation about 20%, 12%, what that percentage is. I think the question before us is, in building the project, what improvements could fall in under that? I personally do not see a difference between site preparation, like tearing down a flood damage, derelict, whatever situation, or putting in wastewater. For me, those are fairly similar.
But wastewater goes to the street and it's universal and non-exclusive. A property that you purchase is exclusive because nobody else can build there. So it's a private benefit. I'm trying to figure out what's the line between public and private here.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Representative Woody.
I hear that, but I'm wondering, I think it's a public benefit to clean up a brownfield or to take down a building that's been flood damaged, because it may be right in the area where you already had some development and now you've got to remediate in order to refill that area.
What if,
I
Yes.
like having that.
John, are you back in computer land?
I am backing.
Okay, can you tell me the difference between, if after the word acquisition, there was the word for demolition, brownfield remediation, or flood remediation mitigation?
Ooh, just a second.
Development or redevelopment.
Is the assumption that the demolition improves the value of the property?
No, it makes it possible to build on it.
I get that. So you're saying that maybe improves the value of the property.
Yeah, it could, it would, and I think that that's why one of the things we're looking at for original taxable value would be to make sure we get the value at a date when maybe, I don't know.
So is the assumption that the municipality is going to buy the property, prepare it, and then sell it to a developer?
I'm gonna have John answer my question.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question was, under site,
Yep.
sub 2, site preparation for development or redevelopment, including and property acquisition for demolition, brownfield remediation, or flood remediation and mitigation.
Moving a comma.
Putting in
Right,
for.
so if the question is just, does that have a true substantive impact?
Yes.
Yes, that entire thing is what it does, right? These are
Okay,
just a list of,
yep,
although it is part of just an inclusive list, right? So it's still
Mhm.
including,
Mhm.
right? And I know that in the prior subdivision, we were specific as to what you wanted to do.
Mhm.
If you want to avoid having broad categories and say specifically what you want approved, what is eligible site preparation for redevelopment, just say outright the things you think are appropriate
yep,
to the extent you can, but
thanks.
Then I'm wondering.
Wait, can I,
Sure.
so would folks feel more how does it feel to make that 4? So that is the purpose of the purpose of preparing, developing, or purchasing the land is towards demolition, brownfield remediation, flood, blah, 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 blah.
Who's purchasing the land? Is this?
I'm gonna see if anyone else wants to jump in here.
I don't think you want to,
Okay,
well, because the developer could purchase the land and then ask for brownfield remediation assistance through this tool. If I'm understanding it right.
But
So it could be both.
what could be both?
It could be both for acquiring the land and also for demolition, brownfield remediation, or flood remediation.
You would like the program to be doing both of those things?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Okay,
But I think.
I'm gonna see if anyone else wants to say anything. Okay, Representative Woody.
So the idea of that inclusive list that you're saying, so this is, if it's not here, then it's not included, is that what you're saying?
No.
No.
I'm saying that if it's not here, it could be.
Okay, I want to be sure that, because we don't know all the things. I don't know if there's a PCB laden building. That's not a brownfield, right?
You could pretend that after the comma, no language exists.
Okay, so, John, I appreciate that, and I think maybe what would be helpful for us, instead of trying to create entirely exclusive lists of everything, because that's hard to do before our program exists, remember that we have both rulemaking in here and we have rulemaking towards prioritization criteria. And so that's a real opportunity for us to have non-exclusive lists that will probably be exclusive-ish in execution. And so my question for you, John, is,
I'm gonna be in the chair.
oh God, I guess so. I'm so sorry.
I don't have to.
No, well, you should. No, do you want to sit over there? I don't care where you sit, wherever you want to sit.
You know, I
I would like you to open the window regardless, though. Thank you.
yeah,
Is it, a question objectively, why wouldn't we just say that the municipality can purchase and prepare the land and then sell it to the developer and recover the cost? Why would we give this public money for private benefit?
Someone else like to.
I feel we have that question.
I was just, so, I feel we're getting very meta.
Yeah.
And, which is fine, but we are currently in a social and governmental environment where the government themselves is not taking on the responsibility of building more social housing. In my perfect world, that's where we would be moving. But in a world where government is not going to accept that responsibility, and in a world where we have a housing crisis, I think it's perfectly okay and acceptable to assist private development in the absence of the government stepping up and simply doing the development themselves.
Is it the help we're trying to give the infrastructure that makes it possible for the market to work?
Yeah. And I think all of these things are included in broader infrastructure.
I guess I would.
Okay, John. Hi. The. Our non-exclusive definitional gist on improvements. Can you tell me how this would fit into prioritization criteria that Betsy would use when creating a prioritization criteria?
Are you asking if Betsy could be tasked with producing an exhaustive list of, no?
No, I'm just asking how the section on prioritization criteria relates to our definitions of improvements.
Okay. Just a second. So I think it is hard to say with the current language how much rulemaking will speak to the definition of improvements, because the current task is they have to adopt rules to govern prioritization, and they take particular things into consideration when they do that, like purpose, vacancy rates, stagnancy, blight. If you wanted a specific directive related to, they may, right? They have the authority to spell out or build out what improvements are, but we don't give them any specific directive on that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Do we have any idea how much something like that would cost? For the remediation of property? Because if this happens multiple times, it's gonna take a housing project.
I think we had some stack scenarios, and I think some of them included site cleanup. But I think for each scenario, you might have very, very different costs about sort of, is it the infrastructure that's expensive? Is it the building that's expensive? Is the acquisition? So I don't know if we're gonna get to that, but that's a good question. John, now that you have very carefully moved from seat to seat, I'm actually gonna ask you to, we're gonna do a quick little
Okay,
total change in subject.
I like that.
Move ourselves out of what feels, yes. And hi, thanks for popping on up. I just don't want us to forget to cover this one thing that has nothing to do with CHIP that is in the bill.
Sure.
So thanks for joining us.
Sure, would you like the amendment language on the screen?
Sure, great, thank you.
I'll talk through it while Sorcha sends me the meeting link.
Thank you.
So Chair Kornheiser, I'm sorry, can I just ask if how to what
Hi.
extent has the committee discussed this particular part of the bill?
Yes.
already? I
Can you
ran over
identify
previous.
yourself for the record.
James Duffy, Joint Fiscal Office.
Thanks, James. Glad you're here. So we have gone through the whole bill, but we have spent the bulk 98% of our time on just the CHIP section.
Understood.
And we have essentially sort of accepted all the other sections of the bill comfortably. And I flagged at some point for everyone that there was a technical amendment that we are going to need to make. And you are here to tell us about that technical amendment.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So I'm joining the Zoom meeting now, but
Thanks for coming up with no prep whatsoever.
no, I have prep. Don't worry, Chair. So the section of the bill that we are looking at, I believe this would still be section 23 of H479. Section is titled Fiscal Year 2026 Environmental Contingency Fund Disbursement for Brownfields. Pull that up behind me. And what this section is accomplishing is simply making sure that DEC has $2 million available to them for brownfield site assessment, planning, and cleanup. And essentially the story behind the amendment that's in front of the committee is a $2.5 million appropriation was made to DEC in fiscal year 2024 for this purpose, brownfield site assessment, planning, and cleanup.
Y'all, I just want to say, isn't it an amazing coincidence that we are actually, we were just talking about brownfields 4 seconds ago. They're unrelated. They are, anyway, this is just a miracle. Thank
Yes.
you.
And just in reviewing the bill, working with the bill, Ledge Council and Joint Fiscal Office identified some technical language changes that needed to be made, such that this money got where it needed to go the proper way. The original language had appropriated money from the general fund to the environmental contingency fund, which would then be used by DEC for this purpose. There were just two kind of technical problems with that. You don't appropriate money from one fund to another. You transfer money for funds from one fund to another. So there was language in the big bill that had to be altered such that we are transferring money from the general fund to the environmental contingency fund for this purpose. So that language has now been corrected in the big bill. That's not what I have in front of me here. This is H479. In the big bill, money is being transferred from the general fund to the environmental contingency fund. And the language in H479 before you now would simply authorize the Secretary of Natural Resources to use that $2 million transfer to the ECF for its intended purpose, the cleanup of brownfield sites. So there's language in the big bill making that change, technical change, and this is the spending authority to the Secretary of A&R to utilize those funds.
So the other $500,000 from where?
Yes, thank you. That, because it was a fiscal year 2024 appropriation originally, DEC had been spending down that appropriation since then. Finance and management estimated that there is $2 million remaining from that original $2.5 million appropriation. Thank you.
Anyone have any, so it's okay with everyone? Yeah.
Just clarification, we're talking about 479, are we putting that into 127 or? Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Yeah. This is not whatever bill number you just said that we're working with.
S120, I apologize.
No, it's-
S27,
Yeah.
yes.
No.
This language will, my understanding, will live in both bills, which is why behind me you see H479 up. I apologize.
I didn't even notice that. Okay.
But yes, I believe both housing bills from both chambers have spoken to this, and so this is the language being used.
And I think there's a general assumption, but no one knows what will happen before the end of the session, that this bill is the bill that's likely to pass.
And be vehicle. Thank you, Representative, for clarifying that, but yes, information is the same.
I think 479 sitting somewhere in the Senate.
H 479 was voted out of Senate Economic Development, yes.
Okay, thank you. Representative Brown.
Just a comment.
Yeah.
I find it really strange that the original power to spend the money wasn't transferred when the appropriation happened, which was really a transfer.
I think sometimes language just
Happens.
gets temporarily, we're fixing it.
One of those 2 o'clock in the morning things.
Who knows, it's a lot of words. This is why we have multiple people looking at things. Representative Maslin?
Yeah, sidebar comment, but Representative Holcomb asked, why does the municipality just take over, you get the money?
Whoa, we're on section 23, right here.
But
Is
it
this
does
about that?
have to do with,
Okay,
brownfields and various other sorts of stuff, so bring it up at the.
okay, thank you.
It's interesting information here.
Okay. Representative Kimball?
I'm just trying to find the language. So I'm in S-127 General Housing Bill, or as it came out of General Housing, and it's different in there.
John's right behind you.
Yes, John.
The reason that James is here is that there's a proposed technical fix, which is what we've just walked through, to include this in the amendment that this committee will provide. So that will become the amendment to S-127. And what you've been saying thus far from me has been standalone language on just the CHIP program. Once these are settled, I drop them into an amendment for the committee, and that's your S-127.
Okay, thank you.
And I just didn't want to surprise everyone with the amendment on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Representative Holcomb?
When municipalities apply for this kind of grant, do they have to disclose if they're getting money from this particular Brownsfield program and the CHIP increment? Or could they get funding to remediate brownfields from both set sources?
Just to be clear, this is unrelated to CHIP. This is just.
I understand that, but from the municipality's point of view, if they were entrepreneurial, if we have multiple programs that address the same problem, could they apply to all of those programs to address the same problem? And how do we?
I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that question either.
Representative Holcomb, if you want to find out who worked on this program and find that out for us during lunch, that would be great.
The answer, but yeah.
Representative Woody?
I was just gonna say, great that we happen to hear this here, because thinking that if we wanted to expand if we wanted to have more availability.
Thanks, James. We're
Within,
good. Thank you.
within what we are able to allow under the cap. If there's there's work going on with A&R and with others, that would be very amazing. I wonder what other people of this, see would be, the place for that to happen, or what?
I don't, we definitely don't have time to take any more tests.
I totally agree.
And I think even within this bill, we've talked about the context of the bond bank, but also, I mean, there are
Bond bank.
multiple other grant programs going that feed a lot of these birds and seeds and hands and such.
So maybe, if we certainly can't do it now, but maybe the next session, we can look at a way to multiply the amount of outreach there go,
Yeah.
get more help for the people who are trying to do the building than just the CHIP money.
Yeah, so last biennium, this committee spent some time on working on sort of an overarching super fund of sorts that would sort of channel all the different infrastructure, federal funds and state funds into one place, so that municipalities wouldn't have to go through 50 different application procedures. And we weren't able to finish that, but that might be a good project for next year. And I think this, to bring us back to the bill, I think this chipboard, since all of those people will now be stuck in a room together with a new purpose, maybe that will emerge more naturally from this board that we've created.
You could always
with
write
this
a letter.
legislation.
If we don't.
And you could write them a letter.
Okay.
Great. Okay.
Instead of putting everything into a statute.
I'm just gonna observe again, having worked in the other side, there is huge cost both in dollars and staffing to creating multiple programs that do the same thing instead of a limited number of programs that.
Representative Holcomb, I think the rest of the committee is ready to move forward with the bulk of this idea. And so we are doing our best to make it as good an idea as possible before it leaves this room. I understand that you don't feel that way. That's
I already
fine.
expressed my acceptance
Yes.
opinion on this,
Yep.
yes, I'm moving on.
Would anyone like to change, does anyone have a tangible suggestion to change the site preparation language? Okay. Anything else before I get to purpose? We'll all get to purpose, not just we. We're gonna do it together. It's gonna be great. Okay. So we made one edit to the purpose with John before this morning. Anything else on the purpose statement? Representative Pigley.
Were we gonna include wording around affordable?
Yeah, that was the one thing that we did this morning that I think John hasn't updated yet. Yes, yeah,
Dude,
yes.
John, no worries if not, but do you have the updated purpose language ready?
I don't, but I could probably just imagine it very quickly. To close up this,
Just before we like close that.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you. Yep.
Curious.
support the development of new primary residences for household of Northern Miami.
Okay.
That's in the original 127.
Love that. It's not nice when committees just like take everything apart and then put it right back together the way it was before.
The joys of legislative
Okay.
process.
Those are work.
Okay. Anything else on the purpose statement? Great. 1908, creation of a housing infrastructure project and housing development site.
This is the narrower definition.
We indeed narrow the definition, yes.
This was the contiguous.
Removing contiguous. If folks want contiguous, they can get it too. Okay, seeing nothing. I'm gonna give people a second to scan pages 5 and 6 silently.
Page 7 minutes, Chair. Criterion is plural. Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
All right.
So worried about
Yeah. Motion's done.
It is the.
Yes.
The municipal.
Representative Brannigan.
I'm not sure this is our business, but it is it the municipality that chooses the developer? Or who-
John, will you come back to the chair?
Thank you, on page 6, line 15 or so.
The easiest way to think about it, I think, is that you're gonna have to have a contractual agreement in place between the muni and the developer. So it's agnostic as to who approaches who. You could imagine that developers may be incentivized to reach out to munis. But munis, if they want to pursue particular projects, can reach out to developers to pursue them. So it's agnostic as to who doesn't take a position of who would initiate. Whether to develop. Did that answer the question? Maybe.
Yes, I think so. So it would be possible for a municipality to choose to have created low-income housing for farm workers?
Oh, sure. And it's important to say that the housing infrastructure agreement, which is this contract, the standards that you have set here are minimal safeguards that have to be met, but the contract could contain other provisions. So if the muni said, the condition for us working with you is that we want this to be available exclusively on this basis, they could work through that. It's not part of the program, but the muni is free to try to negotiate as it sees fit.
And after that, it becomes the developer's responsibility to follow through on that? Is that right?
Right, which is why you have the final subdivision within that agreement section, which speaks to providing performance assurances for all the parties to the agreement, meaning you need to include terms so that people don't follow through on their obligations. You protect your interest. It is broad language. It doesn't say specifically what you have to do. So that's what the point of that language is to try to ensure that everyone is following through on what they do. But of course, in some cases, we see that failures happen. And so you just need to have measures that protect people when that does happen.
I was thinking of how this might actually be useful to rural communities who don't have a lot of development. I can think of a couple handfuls of them. And so one thing those communities typically are looking for is adequate housing for agricultural help. So that would be one way this could really work.
And a farm could even approach a town and then they could go find a developer together. Yeah. Right? Right, John?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, thanks. Okay,
So true.
great. Yes,
What pages are we working through?
we
now?
are about to, we were all reading silently and we are on page, some of us were, and we're on page 7. And if no one has anything yet, I am ready to get to line 19. Okay. And John, you're welcome to mind your own business until we,
Can I offer one?
yes, please.
I don't think this is going to be a problem, but because I don't think they're going to get to it on the Senate floor for a while, but just to know the Capitol bill is on the floor and I will have to run with that. Yeah. But I don't think it's going to affect us, just in case you see me looking at my phone a lot. That's all.
Thank you. Thanks for being here while you're doing that and the other thing. Okay. Setting aside the criterion problem. Line 19. I received a suggestion from all of the kind people that are paying attention to what we're doing. That it might be helpful if, from a process perspective, anyone wants to remember that sort of timeline sorts of process, that VEPC gathers all of the pieces of paper together. And then VEPC asks the chip board to engage in this task once they've handed them all the pieces of paper. And then the chip board says yes or no, and then gives the pieces of paper back to VEPC to finish their work. This would all happen electronically, likely. There might even be multiple copies electronically, but everyone understands the process that I'm discussing? Okay.
Yes.
How does that sound? Okay. Did I describe that inarticulately enough for you to understand what I was saying?
I think my question would be if you need specific legislative language to achieve this, right? And maybe you do want this, but the way that it's currently structured is just that this check has to be performed. And
Okay.
I keep using the word agnostic, but it's agnostic as the applicant is submitting a packet. It's going to both entities.
I guess I would ask for the packet to go to VEPC.
Yeah.
For them to only submit to VEPC.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
And then
I can make that clearer. Yes.
I don't think that making sure it's complete and all the rest of it needs to be spelled out statutorily. I think that should be soon.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Second on that
And
one.
then Pepsi does all the logistics.
Yeah.
That's never.
Okay. Thank you, John. So what the CHIP program board will do How do people feel about lines 1 through 4 there? Okay, the one thing that I am curious about here and wondering if we fulfill is one of the reasons that one of our balance, expertise balances between VEPSI and the chip board was, we put RPC representation onto the chip board because they were the ones who understood the location criteria stuff the best. And is that going to work out in this? I'm not suggesting it won't, check it.
So you're not asking about the membership of the chip board?
No, the chip, so the chip board is where location criteria expertise sits, not VEPSI. And so are we sure that anything regarding location criteria questions is being answered by the chip board and not by VEPSI?
Yeah. The chip board is fine for that. I don't.
Okay, great, onwards. Bottom 8, anyone, anything, top of 9?
Can I confirm something?
Yes, please, Derek.
Sorry, I'm like tuning in and out as I'm, was the request to have location criteria handled by the board? Is it, I just,
Is it not handled by the board right now? Seems
it is
to me it's
handled,
not.
handled by VEPSI right now.
Okay, I think it makes more sense for it to be handled by the board. Thank you.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, there would probably be the board saying, we need to have this criteria to VEPSI to make sure when you present the application to us, all this information is in place.
Agreed. Here we are with that criterion again at the bottom of page 9. Does anyone have anything on that? 65% floor area, is that the right number? Yes, again.
So this is Pepsi interfering with the chip project?
No,
No.
it's not. So I think what we decided ish is that, so it's VEPSI's program. Because VEPSI are the experts in tax increment and monitoring tax increment in partnership with the Department of Taxes. And being able to understand whether something is or is not housing and whether or not something is or is not in the right place for housing is something that the people with the expertise on the chip board is. So VEPSI is managing the whole program and they're just asking the chip board to say yay or nay before they approve a project.
So Pepsi reviews the municipality's housing infrastructure project. That's the one that applied. Okay. Determine whether-
And then there's a long list of criterion.
Your question is, are we still good with 65?
That is indeed my question, yes.
That's an easy question. I am. That's
Great,
all you need.
okay, onward.
Randy answered it.
Okay,
I
no
have a
one's-
clarifying question.
Oh, please do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It says shall review to determine whether at least 65% is dedicated to housing. Does that mean if it's not 65%, the project is automatically ineligible?
That's right.
Okay.
If you don't meet the project criteria, you can't get through. Yep. Criterion, yes.
Onwards through page 10. Then we have a good joke of the day here.
There's not.
It could be a practical preparations committee. Okay. Top of page 11. Nope.
Back to 10.
Yep, back to 10.
So again, this is where I believe that tier 2 should still be included. Even though it hasn't been mapped out yet. I mean, the example that Representative Brannigan just talked about, that is not gonna be in tier 1A or B.
Mhm.
It'll be in tier 2.
So do you have any ideas on what we can do about the timing alignment nightmare that we are encountering with these two projects.
Well, we're still including tier 1B and we don't know exactly.
Agreed, yes.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to make an argument to not include tier 2. I'm wondering if you have a suggestion for how we can solve the problem. That includes B2.
And what's the problem? That there isn't a problem with 1B right now?
That there's a problem with 1B and there's a problem with 2 and there's a problem with the half-mile perimeter thing that's somewhere else.
Yep.
Given that all the things don't line up timeline-wise in their existence. John, you look like you have.
Yeah, may I offer something? So, I mean, the point you identify is equally applicable to tier 1A, tier 1B as against tier 2. But note that that location criterion is tier 1A or B or interim housing exemptions. And the reason that it's structured that way is you do provide an immediate location, areas that are falling within the interim housing exemptions. And then it would necessarily pick up the tier 1A, 1B when in effect. But you could make that tier 1A, 1B contingently effective as well in the future and just have the interim housing exemption. But I guess my point is you have a proxy available for the tier 1A, 1B, which is why that category is included. You could have a proxy for tier 2 as well, but you would need to develop what that is, you know.
And how difficult would that proxy be?
Fairly impossible. Other committees have tried, yes?
I can tell you what other committees have tried if you're interested in that. So in Senate Economic Development, they had a proxy for tier 2 that was basically a letter of support from the RPC that the proposed project would align with regional development plans or something along those lines. So that was their attempt to create something, but it's, I don't know.
And then there was a delayed implementation on tier 2.
Yes.
Okay. Is that what where you were going, Representative Left?
No,
Okay,
go
so
tier 2, but not that.
Could you explain the delay?
John, will you explain the delayed implementation on tier 2 that was in some other committees, something?
For a period, we had an idea of a contingently effective set of tier 2 kick-ins. So once the maps are set right, then you would have it available as a criteria, which we were thinking at the earliest sometime 2027. There was interest, I think on the House side, I'm not sure this happened on the Senate side, in not having a contingent effectiveness, but providing a period in which you could evaluate what that area is, because we just don't know yet, right? It's the absence of other things. So you could delay it after effectiveness kicks in, and the date that people had landed on and what you see in the draft we looked at this morning is a January 1, 2028 effectiveness for that tier 2, which is basically a year following the earliest we expect that the designations could be made. That's the thinking of the current effective date for that tier 2 expansion in the draft this morning.
Is that included in this interim exemption?
No, I mean, I can't speak to what falls into the bucket of things that are the interim housing exemption, but given that it was proposed as a proxy for tier 1A, tier 1B, I'm guessing it is not a proxy for tier 2.
One thing that would help me through that looping timeline problem is also having line 7 sunset.
Sorry, which page?
Oh, I'm on page 10.
Yeah.
Because that was part of an interim thing to cover until 181 finished its 181-ness, right? I think that's what Ellen said.
You could remove this, yeah, you could do a prospective repeal of this. And in fact, that had been the way I initially drafted it for House General, was that when their tier 2 kicked in, it would replace the existing settlement. They didn't like that, so
Okay,
I ended up with
you
it.
like it? I like it. Is
Okay.
that okay with other people?
I do like it.
Okay.
I was thinking if we could just deal with the effective date somehow, and that does it better.
Did you save that particular sentence that you put, John?
Oh, it's
in your-
simple. It's.
I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
Okay,
As of what then? So
whatever, when the tier 2 date is.
Which the current is January 1, 2028.
Okay. So we're swapping. Okay.
The actual date, John, that this section goes into effect. Is there an effective date for?
Yeah, the program is in like a few months this year.
July 1.
I won this year.
So I don't know, I have a real issue with that, and I know that like I said, rural caucus is definitely looking for that. I believe the governor's looking for that. And whether, we're talking, if you're talking 2028, that's 3 years out, and then another year or more for, the possibility of project identification and moving forward. So we're a long ways out, and I think there should be or could be some opportunity for things like Carolyn had just said. I mean,
Yeah.
there was an article in the news in Greensboro.
Mhm.
There's a farm that's looking
Yeah.
for housing. That would definitely be outside of tier 1 and tier 2, I'm sure.
And so in the prioritization criteria, and around there, we can add intent towards rurality or geographic equity. Given that tier 2 won't exist, I'm not sure how effective we could be in having the implementation date of something related to tier 2 move up. So I'm not sure what you're,
So
I'm trying to get my head around
the
tangible
You suggest it be in the interim? I mean, between now and the time that tier 2 is.
what I suggested. The 1/2 mile, yes. So 1/2 mile would live there, would be here in the program. And then when tier 2 kicks in, that goes away. So they swap out for each other.
I guess it's a start, yeah.
Okay.
Representative Higley, you're just trying to make sure that development is not restricted from rural Vermont.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I'm not on such a.
Agreed, yeah.
timeframe as well.
Yeah. And I think, and my understanding, that 1B is something that rural Vermont should be able to access and can access. But we can look into that more over the lunch hour. Okay.
Because again, there's a possibility of a project in a very rural area that has good soils that we put in a number of houses without having, infrastructure on the side.
Absolutely.
Well, it's happened to some degree.
Yeah.
So, okay, thanks.
Yes, Representative Wozniak, so sorry.
I wasn't sure if you were probably.
Yeah.
We still don't even know what tier 1B is going to look like, so it feels weird that we're fine putting it in tier 1B, but we're not going to tier 2. If you'll indulge me for a quick second, I want to jump ahead towards the end of the draft. It's directly related to tier 2, I promise. On page 25, John, at the bottom, there's a mention of tier 2.
Yes,
And I'm just confused as to what that means.
that's the expansion of tier 2, January 1, 2028, if I'm just a second, bottom of page 25. Yes. So this is a future effective amendment to the program that you're proposing, right?
It's the swap out.
Exactly. That's what it would become. Yeah, exactly. So 2 would become, instead of existing settlement, it would become tier 2. The reason you don't see the underlining is you've created that section above. That's what you're doing in the CHIP program. And then now you're amending it in the future.
And are you recommending that 1B get moved into the future implementation?
No.
Okay. Is anyone else recommending that? I think it might make more sense.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
okay,
in favor.
okay. And I don't know if 1B and 2 are active the same.
What the tiers are, but
Yes.
the tiers in this drives me nuts because we don't know what they are. And so tying this to them makes no sense when we're already putting in criterion that the board is going to look at to prioritize vacancy rates and all of these other things that we're talking about.
Okay, yes, good.
That might be above my pay grade.
Can I offer something,
So much.
maybe helpful context as to why you would or would not want things that don't exist in law? The advantage of the way as currently constructed for tier 1A and tier 1B is that when they do come online, they would be picked up immediately. That would be the effect of having them on. It doesn't mean anything until they're created. You have available the interim housing exemption, and as soon as the designations are made, they are immediately available. Whereas if you set a specific date, they don't come online until that specific date, regardless of if the determinations or designations have been made in advance of that. The reason a year delay was proposed for for the tier two piece. And so why you ended up with a future effective date for that was that people wanted a chance to see what the scope of that is, whereas I got the sense that there was a better sense of how people thought tier 1A and 1B might work out.
The way Ellen described it to us. Was that yesterday?
Yeah.
Cool. It was, she, she described very explicitly to us tier 1A, 1B, very explicitly to us tier 3, and then tier 2 is everything else, right? And so that everything else requires a little more framing. Thank you, John. Okay. I'm gonna move on to page 11. Oh, nope, we're gonna skip page 11 because Pat and Ted haven't had a chance to spend a moment with each other. I'm gonna move on to page 12 and leave page 11, not saying it's clear, saying that this is the largest outstanding issue before us. Okay. Page 12, 13, 14, 15. Representative Higley,
We're already at page 14 and 15.
unless you have something on 12 or 13.
Okay, no, I'm good until page 21. Thanks, sorry.
Oh, great. If only you could go there. Okay. I bet the lilacs are blooming at my house.
Don't think about it. Don't think about it.
I'm gonna think about it. That's what I think about on Fridays.
Sneezing already.
It's all my Southern Vermont flowers. Okay. Page 16. Yes.
Just getting lost. Can someone remind me where we landed with the original taxable value clock? Representative
Approval by
Odie.
Pepsi.
Okay.
Which is further in the future than if it was when the municipal.
I just remember Representative Odie brought up some things about that.
Oh, yes, I did.
I know. Well, yes.
Representative Feltus did confirm that 60% was what she was looking for there
Page
on
16.
page 16. Yes.
So this still has the construct that if it's affordable housing,
Mhm.
then it's an additional 20%.
And that is also what she was looking for. I don't know if it works for other people, but I just said I would confirm with her and in her absence, and I am. Okay. Moving on to page 17.
On the face of it, I'm still on that.
Oh,
It's
okay.
60-80,
Mhm.
and the sense of simplicity versus complexity, is that much more difficult to administer, the 20 versus 80? I mean,
No.
60, what's the 20 to get to 80?
I think Betsy has a lot of expertise on varying increments, given that we change the TIF law every couple of years. And the increment changes. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, page 17. Page 18. Page 19.
Just go back.
Yeah.
It does remind me, so, and I'm glad we've included the 5 years there, but I know Pepsi said that they come back every year. I mean, should that be spelled out here at all, or is it, we're just,
That is spelled out here.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, yep,
We'll
sorry.
get to the reporting in a minute, or not in a minute, after lunch, I think probably we'll get to the reporting. Page 19. When we get to the bottom of page 21, we're going for lunch.
So we'll do 21 app, we'll do
We'll
the
do 20, yeah.
making after lunch.
We're making after lunch. Seeing no one, nothing. Going once, going twice. Yes, Representative Bodie.
That's Apple.
That's after lunch.
After lunch.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
What's that?
At 1:30.